Hi, so I'm Dan Egan, and I'm here from New York, where I work at Mount Sinai St. Luke's Roosevelt. And I'm going to try and convince you in the next 5 minutes how we all, as emergency providers, can help to end the HIV epidemic from the place that we work. So my story starts in 2006. This was my first job out of residency at St. Vincent's Hospital, which is now luxury condos well beyond any physician's income salary in New York. But this was kind of the epicenter for taking care of HIV patients in the 80s and 90s. Everybody went there because it was a place that was safe. And this is me at work, a lot more hair, a little younger, and definitely skinnier. And my chair asked me to be the HIV champion for our department, so like any new grad, I said yes. And I got involved in this, and I became really passionate about this. One of my goals was to not have this be the scenario anymore, where annually multiple names of people dying from AIDS-related illnesses were being added to this quilt shown all over the country for a treatable disease that could be really a chronic illness. In today's environment, we're living with 1.1 million people in the US who have HIV. In New York, in the 5 boroughs, there are about 125,000 people with this disease. And so that means we represent greater than 10% of the disease burden of the entire country. About 14% of people who are infected don't know that they're infected. And these are the people who are at risk of transmitting to others because they're not aware of their status, they're not on meds, and they're not becoming virally suppressed. And we know that this is still happening. And each year, 38,000 new people are infected with HIV. And while there's been some progress over the last 10 years, you can see that the slope of this line is not very steep. And we have a frequent continued exposure. And what's more alarming about this is the new infections are actually represented by mostly underrepresented minorities and people from lower socioeconomic classes. And I'm not sure about your department, but certainly in my urban New York City emergency department, these are the people that I see every single day in my practice. And so I'd like to encourage you to think about routinizing HIV testing and offering a test and getting patients to say yes to a test while they're in the ED, endorsed by ACEP since 2007 and the CDC since 2006. And you might hear some stories if you don't do targeted testing. I've diagnosed an 84-year-old grandfather with HIV. I diagnosed a woman from Yemen in a full burqa who thought her husband was monogamous with her. These are real people affected, and if we link them to care, we can get them engaged in treatment. The most exciting thing to me that's happened in the last couple of years is the PARTNER study, which demonstrated with over 50,000 condomless sexual encounters of a positive person with an undetectable viral load having sex with a negative person, there wasn't a single case of HIV transmission. And so what does that mean? It means you equals you, a slogan being broadcast throughout New York. If you're undetectable in your viral load, you cannot transmit virus. There has never been a case report of someone transmitting when they're undetectable. So if we find them and diagnose them and link them to care and get them virally suppressed, we're making a difference. We're also the people that patients go to when they're acutely seroconverting. This is an illness that lasts for a week, they feel really bad, and about 75% of them will visit an emergency department when they're sick. They're 20 times more infectious during this phase. So if we find them and we recognize the symptoms, which are like a lot of other viruses, but don't include a respiratory component, and sometimes have mucosal lesions, and sometimes have a viral exanthem type of rash, and we send the right test, which is a viral load, we can prevent additional infections in that population. We're also the experts in PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis. We have a narrow window of time during which we can start therapy that prevents the virus from replicating in us such that it won't disseminate to the rest of the body and someone will not seroconvert. So in the ED, we have to know who's at risk, we have to get them their first dose, we have to link them to follow-up so they complete their 28 days, and likely prevent them with almost 100% effectiveness of becoming HIV positive. Additionally, we need to be aware of something called PrEP. So pre-exposure prophylaxis, where people take daily Truvada, the only medicine currently FDA approved, as a preventive measure to prevent you from acquiring HIV if you're engaging in risk behavior. Only a handful of case reports of this failing. So I implore that we can be part of this plan that the New York governor has said to end AIDS by 2020 in our state. I think this can be a nationwide endeavor, and we as emergency providers play a significant role, I think, in adding to that public health mission. This is not a sexy ER topic, I get it. But through testing, through recognition of acute HIV, through starting PEP and referring for PrEP, I actually think that we can play a big impact in decreasing those 38,000 new infections each year. And our ultimate goal is kind of create this as a memory, where we no longer talk about people dying from HIV. 35 million people have died from this illness since it started. And we can talk about this as a memory from the past and potentially see this epidemic no longer part of our world. Thanks.